Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. It's Mike Stone here, and so thrilled and ecstatic to have Finnian Kelly with us on the podcast. Finnian, it's so good to see you, man.
Mike, it's an absolute pleasure. I love co-creating with you, and this is a new way for us to do that.
Super exciting. So, you've got a couple of things brewing in your life right now, both personally and professionally. Professionally, as we've already kind of alluded to, you've got a new book coming out in what'll be, I think, a couple of weeks from now.
So June 18th. Yep.
June 18th. So fantastic. Obviously we're gonna dive into that, but maybe just to get us started, for some background for listeners who might not be familiar with you and what you do, give me a little bit about your upbringing, sort of like the days in Tasmania and sort of the evolution into the Finnian that I know and have met.
Yeah, I imagine it's funny when I meet people in America and they find out I'm from Tasmania. The only connection, they're like, the devil? And I go, yeah, that's me. I've arisen. I've come from there. So I grew up on a farm in rural Tasmania, and it's a wild place. Like, it's not many people live there. It's very wild living, but also very beautiful. We have some of the best food, best wine, most pristine beaches you could ever imagine. So it's a very special, lush place, but it's a small town syndrome, even though it's an island of Australia. And I grew up in a really interesting life. I had a mother who was a doctor, and her family were sort of lineage of doctors and a Russian heritage. And my grandfather was actually a Russian surgeon, and then joined the British military in the Second World War, and he was a surgeon there, and he ended up being a prisoner of war being in a prisoner of war camp and witnessed some pretty horrible things, and ended up, when he got to leave, they just said, all right, where do you want to go? And he picked a superintendent job of the hospital in Tasmania. And that's an important part because there is a lineage there of some trauma, which I think flowed down through my mum and definitely transferred onto myself and the relationship that I was brought up with. My dad was a musician, a rebel. He is the sort of like very smart person, but he was a rebel, and he was on the path of, I found out actually, it was a pretty interesting story as we reconnected, which is another story. We went a long part without connecting, but the couple of years before he birthed me into his life, he did 200 hits of acid over a couple of years. And he said it was the best stuff back there. So you realize the different dynamics. And I think what happened is two entities that normally would never have crossed, and then they procreated me. And it was a very, very interesting experience. And I share that because it really is. It's one of those magical things where two random ingredients mix, and ingredients that weren't ever really meant to mix. Like, it was explosive. Remember that science experiment where the teacher was like, never mix these ingredients. That was the example. It was like explosive. It was very chaotic, and there was a lot of drama, a lot of trauma. But they produced me, and I am a product of them. And in some regards, yes, my previous story was I was a victim of that experience, but I now look at it and go, oh wow, like that's why I'm actually doing what I'm doing, because I've been driven from realizing that you can have so much more love into this world, and how we need to be more compassionate and kind to each other. And I just never wanted to experience what I experienced with them. So that's a bit of my upbringing. And what I really did was, because I didn't feel safe in my own environment and didn't feel loved, didn't feel appreciated. All my stories, I just want to make that very clear. It was my perspective at the time. My childhood self went, well, okay, we've got to create some protective beliefs around you. And I went, well, I'm alone, so I've got to create myself. So from a very young age, I started earning money, I became independent, and I started getting very focused. How do I get myself out of this? And that got me, I found a way to get myself a scholarship at a really good school because I started seeing in tennis certain people's lives, and I wanted more of that. I skipped grades through academic. I really created an independence. I even emancipated myself from my parents because it was a way that I could then get some financial income from the government to create that level of independence. And ultimately, I broke away from the tradition of being a doctor. I actually got accepted into medicine. My 5 best friends all got accepted into medicine. We were like the athletes and the academics, and we were going on this journey. But in my heart, it was screaming to me, like, do not do this. Like, this is so wrong. Because I witnessed the medical profession. I witnessed it through my mom and my uncle and my grandparents, and it was a lot of misery, and I didn't feel like it was authentic. And I'm not against the whole medical industry, but there's elements of it, and we're agreeing in this phase, I think. And I just went, no, there has to be something more. But my limited construct, my ego went, well, I can't go do some of my passions. Like, what could be cooler than being a doctor? And I ended up getting accepted as a helicopter pilot in the Australian military, and I became an army officer equivalent to West Point. And ultimately, it wasn't my path, but I'm very grateful because it got me out of that conventional path, and it was a sidestep somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It was like totally my second choice after medical school was to be a helicopter pilot in the Australian military. So I see how that was was a logical choice.
Yeah,
yeah. It's I mean, really like a it's not even rebellion that comes to mind. It's escape.
It was
like, I just need to get out of this situation.
Survival, literally, survival. And in some regards, and this was my big lesson that came later, I thought I was an abundant person. I thought I believed in all this love, and I did consciously, but at the core foundation, it was survival. It was all survival. And when you live off a survival-based paradigm, eventually it will all come crashing down. It doesn't matter how much you create, and that's what I went through this creative, expansive period. Your core foundations are what determine the strength of the whole property. So my core foundations were survival. It was fear-based. And eventually that forced me, a series of events forced me to sort of wake up and go, okay, you can't live this way anymore. And that's where I've really transitioned to all my work to go, how do we transition from the survival to really thriving concept?
Well, and it's, there's all these, there's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, there's all sorts of reactions to this constant, hypervigilant, sympathetic environment that so many folks find themselves in. And, it's really, I think for the really creative types, of which I clearly consider you one, it's interesting to me how often I've heard this story of, creating a mirage of control, as the compensatory mechanism for survival, fear, whatever you want to call it. And it's true, no matter how good that mirage is, it's still a mirage. And at some point, something's going to kind of trip the first card in that house of cards, and cause a complete reanalysis. So, what was what tripped your house of cards, Finny?
Yeah, so I just want to quickly riff off something you said, and then I'll come back and answer that. There was what you said about how we all react to circumstances differently. So if you get persecuted enough, if an aggressor's coming to you, you become a victim and you can back away. But eventually, one survival way is actually to become the aggressor. You actually go, well, I'm going to come up against the aggressor. So there was a period there where I was almost labeled a delinquent in some regards. At one point, my father and my mother nearly allowed it too, nearly put me into juvenile detention, called the police on me. And if you know me, you can see that I don't have a single DNA part in my body which is an aggressor. I'm the biggest love ball ever. I'm funny. I love life. And if you look at my core of my childhood, that's what I was. Everyone remembers me. But there was a period there I went, well, the only way to come up against this is I've got to rise up again and attack it. And so I used anger and aggression, and I would antagonize my dad and create these different elements. But that wasn't who I was. And it's a real shame. Some people, we look at them and we judge them. And I just want you to just look at them compassion and go, maybe there's a little boy in there who's a loving, happy boy, or a little girl who doesn't want to be like this, but that's the only way they know how to survive. And this is the problem with the modern day, the way we penalize people in the penal system, like the judicial system, is we just judge on the act and we don't take any context into that experience. And there's been so many moments where if you'd heard the context of why someone went through that, suddenly the content would change. So that's just something I wanted to share there because I think it's very important. And then my really great awakening moment was when I had achieved my vision for my life. I had actually achieved it. I was living a beautiful life. I was skiing 100 days a year. I was financially independent, had a woman I love, had business exits, and the illusion of when came crashing down. I thought once I had achieved all of this, I would feel what I was hoping was a sense of meaning, a sense of whole, that I was enough. And unfortunately, because I was one of the few who actually achieves it, then the illusion comes crashing down. When you're in the mode of building and creating, you can just keep pushing it down. You just keep going forward. But when you actually achieve it, that's the most confronting place, because now you can't delude yourself anymore. Like now you have to actually face it and go, oh, maybe something's happening internally. Like it doesn't matter how much I create on the external is a representation of the internal. If my internal is not fulfilled, then the external doesn't fulfill me either. So that illusion came crashing down. Now, unfortunately, I didn't see it fully. I couldn't embrace it. I couldn't experience it. So then I think my soul or spirit did it to me. It was like, all right, we're going to start putting some wake-up calls to see if you wake up and pay attention. And effectively, all these random events that we think are random, but as you know, in this world, nothing is random. The world is non-linear. It's just like it's not chaotic. It's absolutely beautiful. All these events happened, which resulted in my father-in-law passing just before we got married, a business like me burning out. We got into a legal suit over a business, loss of money, and then ultimately my wife leaving me in a relationship forced me to just go, oh, wow. Like I was in survival. There was like the ultimate survival mode. Like I was questioning, how do I live each day? Because everything that I built to protect this feeling of maybe I am something was just taken away, and I had to face myself, and it was devastating. It was like absolutely like so confronting. However, I love that younger version of myself because he saw a path and he looked at like, all right, how does he approach this right now? And he went, all right, he can keep doing what he's done before in these situations. He'll just double down on it. And that will be the path of where I'm going to create businesses again. I'm going to just not trust women. I'm going to party. I'm going to do all these different things. And I knew where that path ultimately led. It just led to where I was back here because I'd experienced that enough. And really that path was the path of fear. It was that fear of going, all right, I'm just going to distract myself. And then I went, all right, what's the other path? And that path was complete responsibility. I had to really look at myself and go, I am the connector through my life. One core belief I had at that time was I am the creator of my own reality. So if I'm the creator of my own reality, well, I have to look at what's happening right now. So I faced myself and I started reflecting, well, what are all the things that could have perhaps contributed to like my marriage ending? And I started just journaling and reflecting, and I went back. I went, well, you know what? I've always had a bit of a body complex. Like that might have affected my intimacy. I've also haven't spoken to my father in 18 years. And this is the guy I wanted dead. So maybe that has contributed. I have resentment against my mum. I have all these different things, and I just listed them all off. And I went, okay, took a deep breath, and this was by far the harder path in the short term. But I looked at it and I went, you know what? Maybe if I do this, I have a chance of, one, loving myself. Maybe I'll find someone who I can love again. Maybe I could be a dad one day. And maybe, you know what? Maybe some good will come out of this. And then I just leaned into it and I went, all right, I'm going to face it all. And I rang up ex-girlfriends. I went and met my dad for the first time. That's something I never thought I would do. I did a trip with my mum, like all these different elements. And I see this as the path of love. Every moment I had to lean in. Now, that doesn't mean it was easy. Actually, it was the harder path. But love, when you keep leaning on that path of love, it just keeps opening up more and more possibilities. And here I am today with a new beautiful partner. I've got a baby boy. You were about to share that, a baby boy coming very soon. I've got my new book, just came in the mail today, which is my whole life journey to get to this point and sharing. My life is more expansive than I could ever had dreamt of. But most importantly, it's not about the material possessions outside. It could all be taken away from me, and I don't think I would be fazed. Like, I have a really great internal place of peace, love, and joy because I've faced it all. Like, I literally have faced it all. And it's liberated me. It's freed me. And that is worth more than any financial structure I could have.
Wow. I mean, so much there. It's I mean, there's elements of the dark night of the soul. There's really I have a recovery background, and there's elements of making amends, and really all the hard work that ends up opening you up, and that's ultimately, I think, one of the hardest things is opening.
Yes.
Because when you're in that contracted, hypervigilant, pattern, it's just so much easier to close, and so much easier to not be vulnerable, especially for men. I'll say that it's I don't think I had male friends I would tell that I loved until I was probably in my 30s or maybe even 40s. Right? I mean, it's totally. It's just culturally not something that's really emphasized or encouraged in Western culture.
Yeah. And I think something we connect on is the idea of the divine feminine, that's like, I've committed my life to serve the divine feminine energy. And that's not females, it's the divine feminine energy. We have the feminine energy in us, in it, as well as the masculine. Everyone does. It's the law of gender. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the female race. Like, they've been persecuted for so long, but there's also a challenge with men right now. There's a feeling of, like, in some regards, it's okay for a woman to talk about sexual abuse. And I really want to make it clear, I'm not making anything about lesser of them. It's literally in this situation right now. But for men, we have no idea how many men have been sexually abused as well. Because for a man to share that, like, that's another violation. Like, they're not a man if they're not doing that. And part of my work at the moment, it's fascinating, just time after time in my breath journeys and the different immersions that I'm doing, sexual abuse to men is coming up. And I'm no wonder why, like, the feminine has been persecuted as well, because the men are being persecuted. They're not feeling safe. And I really do believe we have to work with the men to make them more conscious and help them connect to their feminine more, so then it doesn't have this effect on the feminine as well. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I think a lot of people forget what is actually happening in us. And in some regard, we're all just one, we're all the same, and we're all suffering in some regard.
Yeah, I mean, we've got such a hyper-polarized society where, those two things can both be true and both be so, deeply felt and painful that, clearly, if you're going to look, as you said, historically across the human race, women have been persecuted and abused to an order of magnitude, many orders of magnitude more than men. And at the same time, so the end instead of the but, and men are also victims of abuse and often perpetrate that abuse in future generations and throughout their lives when that's happened to them. So everybody needs help. Everybody needs healing. And, I don't know if this is originally attributed to Gabor Mate, but, hurt people hurt people. Right. I mean, it's to your point earlier about the context behind an action. I think it's Sam Harris tells a story, and I can't remember the guy's name, but went up in maybe like 80s or 90s in the United States, in Texas somewhere, went up into a church tower and brought a weapon and shot a lot of people, innocent people, and left a suicide note. And, his suicide note was all about these thoughts he couldn't control and what was happening to him. And at autopsy, he had a huge brain tumor, right? And, you look there, the action's still horrific, and yet the context kind of changes everything and how you view the action. So I think not surprising to be having been around some of your breathwork sessions that deep trauma is coming up for both men and women. I think those are powerful.
And that's a privilege that we get to hold that space for it and to normalize it. Like when someone brings it up, I'm like not going, oh, I don't like go, oh my God. I'm like, oh yes. Like I'm like, yes, this. Let's feel this right now. Like let's release this. And as we know, just because like trauma is never about the event. Trauma is our perspective of the event. And generally it's, did we actually feel the full expression of those feelings that incident created us at the time? If we don't, it gets stored in our subconscious and it keeps creating more of it. So when we go through different journeys, medicine journeys, breath journeys, whatever it is, and we go deep into the subconscious and we feel something that happened in the past in the present moment, because the subconscious doesn't know the difference between time in the future or the past. It just knows now. It's happening right now. We get to feel it. And if we fully feel this, you actually can walk away and not have that trauma affect you for the rest of your life. Like we don't have to have trauma define us, but we have in our modern day society, we have such an aversion to any unpleasant feelings, any unpleasant situations, that we think we're feeling things when we're actually doing the opposite. We're trying to push it away. So when that moment happens, like I'm in a breath journey and I witness it, I'm like, yes, let's go. And I get excited for them. And you see, like when I hear someone share about their sexual trauma, there's a genuine, like it's almost a smile and a light up and I lean in because I go, all right, this is the moment. Like this is where you get to liberate yourself and you transition from being the victim of someone else's horrible persecution event and you get agency back of your life. And I've witnessed it so many times where it's like, that is exciting. Rather than what happens in a lot of situations is we feel sorry for that person. And now we're disempowering that person. Or we like think that they're damaged forever. No, everything is malleable. The only thing that is permanent in life is change. So when people go, oh, people can't change or I can't change. No, you are changing every second. Right now, as we've spoken, we're changing. Ourselves are changing. And that's, I think, what I love about your work and what we do together is we can show that with some intention and some actions lined up with it, you can become a completely new person. And you can literally, I know with the work you do, you can take a decade off your, like adding a decade onto your life, like taking a decade off your age just by feeling and dealing with these things now.
Yeah. And I think, with my medical hat on, worth just emphasizing something that I know you also would see eye to eye on, Finnian, which is like there are full-blown, PTSD style situations where you should be working with a trained therapist and you may need significant cognitive behavioral therapy, ketamine therapy, emerging therapies. It's not that every time trauma comes up, it's just once you feel it, it's gone. But it's amazing how often trauma comes up and when it's truly felt and let to run through, it's gone. And that's something I have a couple of friends who do eye movement desensitization therapy and reprogramming, so EMDR, and that's it. They're just trying to tap that experience to come back up to be fully felt, because we don't process it when we don't feel safe. Yes. So you need to be in a place where you feel safe, which is when you can then work on processing. And this isn't medical advice. Everyone should use their own judgment and talk to their own care providers. But, a lot of this can be done in group work. A lot of it can be done individually, sometimes with a physician, sometimes with a therapist, sometimes with a friend, and sometimes with somebody. I mean, I can attest just personally, you hold such a beautiful space for people to work through their experiences. And I think it's, we need so many more modalities, because, one thing that's broken about the American healthcare system is mental health services. So, there are, you could wait 6 months to go talk to somebody about what's going on with you. That may also be necessary.
Yeah. I love how you're focusing on the safety, because that is the thing, is at that point of time, you didn't feel safe for whatever reason to feel that feeling. And it was too confronting. Like a lot of the stuff that happens to us, including me, I was like, of course a young child like couldn't feel that. Like it's too much for them. But now when you, and I agree that you like to clarify, it's not like a one and done, but the one and done is if you do feel it, you've just desensitized it a little bit. So next time when you feel it again, it's not the same fear factor. It's not the same scary. It's like, just like once you realize, this isn't me, this doesn't define me, like there's something bigger, then you're on the path of transformation. And I believe in the quantum world that once something is created, it's happened. Yes, it takes time to materialize, and you might have to take a couple of years of all these different treatments. But that first moment when you face it and you make that intention to heal, you have healed. Like that's sort of how I feel it. But there's always the time factor in our 3D world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's I mean, it's a good transition probably into intentionality, which is the title of the book. If I didn't mention it, but you know, the intention to go to ceremony or breath work or whatever sort of or a therapy session, you know, or to, you know, stop drinking and go to your first AA meeting. Right, that's the beginning of your healing journey, is when you make the decision and you evoke that intention to actually do something and to open up possibility. So I'd love to hear just sort of like, how do you define? You know, people are. I'm sure a question. I know you're on the podcast circuit right now with the book coming out. I'm sure that you get this a ton, and it's like the most softball question. But like, what's intentionality to you? And when somebody asks you, "Oh, that's the title of your book," great. What does that mean? What's the Finnian response?
Yeah, so it's funny. Intentionality is in the zeitgeist right now. It's thrown into dialogue all the time. Like I work with a lot of leaders, and I witness them as they speak into the teams. It's like, we just need more intentionality. We need this, but very few people actually know what it is. Like if you ask them, what does it mean? And for me, I want to take you back to that story you said, like my moment of that transformational moment, my dark night of the soul. Because that was really the birth of intentionality. I was in that moment one day, like in survival mode, like facing everything. And I remember waking up and I just sat with myself and I said, I never want to feel like this again. And I just sat with that. I went, I never want to feel like this again. And in that moment, a little light bulb came up, because I went, oh, I didn't say I don't want to think this way again. It was feel. And I was a very intellectual, analytical person. I've got a maths, physics degree, finance degree. Like that was the realm. And I went, oh, feelings, that's interesting. And then I went, well, feelings, okay, I never want to feel like this again. And I wrote down, well, how do I want to feel? And ultimately, there was like peace, love, and joy, but it was really, I just want to feel some peace. I just want to be able to get through this day. And then I went, okay, and I started reflecting. I went, has there been some things that I've done that have brought some more peace over previous days? And I started writing out this list of things, like going for a walk, sitting in the sun, calling a friend, doing something nice for someone, eating good food, sleeping well. And there was a list of 16 things. And I just went, okay. And I was very struggling. I was surviving in this mode. Like I was questioning. I went, well, what's the easiest thing I can do right now? Well, there's sun outside. I can just open the door and go sit out in the sun. And I noticed as I was sitting there, some energy was coming through. And I had a little moment where I just sort of like went into alpha or theta, and it was just a little moment of peace. And I went, well, that felt nice. And I went, all right, what's the next thing? And I went for a walk. And I started realizing, this is the secret. The secret is get clear on how you want to feel, and then take incremental steps towards making that a reality. And that's how I define intentionality, is identify how you want to feel and then take incremental steps towards making that a reality. It's a combination of clarity of vision, but also doing what needs to happen in the present moment. And the master key intention of intentionality is prioritize feelings over outcomes. I'm not saying get rid of outcomes. I'm not saying get rid of goals, but prioritize the feelings. Because what I realized was I'd been living outcomes, goals first. I had very clear visions for my life, and I just went, I've got to do all of this. And the reason why I wanted to do all of this is because I hoped it may give me a feeling, but I wasn't even aware of what feeling I really wanted. I was just hoping. I didn't want to feel the current way. It was an opposite of what I was doing. It was like, I didn't like how I was feeling now. Well, I want something different. But the problem is I wasted not wasted, but I did 5 years of my life. And there I am, not feeling. I thought these goals were going to give me this feeling. And I went, well, I can't do this again because I can't even think about 2 weeks away. I can only think about today. So what do I want to feel? And then do that action. And I just started doing that. And my life started changing. And I started feeling more and more peace and more love and more joy. And it gave me the courage in the present moment of going, what can I do? Because the gravity of what I'd lost, I couldn't vision the future. I couldn't write any goals, nothing. But I just went, all right, how can I make myself a little bit better? And now I've lived my life that day. Every day I wake up and I go, all right, how do I want to feel today? And I connect to that feeling. And then I go, okay, I visualize myself going throughout the day when I'm interacting with people. Today I wanted to be energizing because the last couple of days, I've just been on 7 weeks on the road, back-to-back gigs. And you know some of the stuff I've done. I've done a lot. And I came back and I was feeling a little bit exhausted and I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself. And I knew that, if I give that to other people, it's just going to come back to me. So I went, all right, I'm going to be energized. And I visualized myself speaking to you, doing different things. And you'll see I'm high energy today. Like it's powerful and it's fueling me. And then at the end of the day, I reflect and go, how did I go against my intention? I rate myself out of 10. What did I learn from it? And if there was moments where, you know what, my subconscious program kicked in and I didn't do what I wanted to do, I don't beat myself up about it. I go, great, I have another opportunity tomorrow, so I'm going to do that different. But also, I'm going to go into the quantum world right now and I'm going to revise what actually happened. How would I have done that differently and actually feel myself do that? Because the magic is the subconscious can't tell the difference between something really happening or happening in your imagination. So I actually revise that experience and things that I thought were permanent or had happened, suddenly I wake up the next day and things have changed. Like I thought that incident had hurt someone and then no one even notices or they comment, or I had an injury. Even with injuries, this is wild. I've had a real pattern with injuries over my life and it's a sabotaging experience. I would roll my ankle and I would go into this trauma about, it's so bad. What's going to happen? It's going to take away my experience. Instead, I ask, what's your message, ankle? And then at the end of the day, I revise myself rolling my ankle. I visualize myself like bouncing on a trampoline, going for a run, and something that is swollen in pain next day or a few days later, suddenly nothing. And that's now where we're going into a really beautiful world. And I know you're exploring this because you're very on the cutting edge of medicine, is where we're realizing that we've forgotten that we are incredible, powerful people. We are healers. Whatever we want, we can create. And if there's ever, and people go, what about the science? Look at the placebo effect. The placebo, the thing that is most studied in the world, because it's being used by the pharmaceutical industry, all we have to do is beat the placebo by a little bit. We don't focus on, but what about this placebo, which is 50% plus is healing without doing anything? Why are we tapping into that part of the world? And that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that came up for me there was just like athletic performance and visualization, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, talk about the subconscious not knowing. The body doesn't even need to be involved. You imagine yourself, hitting the slalom gates or, winning the tennis match or the sprint or whatever else. And we know that athletic visualization, performance visualization really translates into physical performance. And it's fascinating to think about because there is such an effective component to pain, for example. So the difference, there is physical pain. It's really important that we have physical pain. It tells us to take our hand away from something that's burning our hand. And at the same time, a lot of chronic pain, the actual like inflammatory signals that are present at the time of the injury are gone. And it's real pain. I'm not saying that people don't feel chronic pain. Of course they do. But it's complex mechanisms and they're not well understood by quote unquote science. There's a lot that goes into, this 10 people can have the same injury and we're not great at telling why some people have chronic pain from that injury and some people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, the placebo effect should be zero, right? We think,
Yes.
giving you sugar water and nothing should happen. And actually like placebo is really powerful.
Oh, it is.
So what I also just like, I felt like, it should be like, instead of ABCs in kindergarten, what if somebody went to me when I was 5 years old and said, what's really important is to figure out how to feel what you're feeling and to focus on feeling the right way. and to really pursue a feeling, because you mentioned it, but I think it deserves emphasizing. So many people don't feel well. They feel dis-ease and think that, and maybe it's shame, and maybe it's unworthiness, and maybe it's anger, and like whatever it is, whatever the feeling is, and think, well, once I just do this, I'm not going to feel that way anymore. And it's this future gazing at this goalpost, this will happen, at that goalpost, this will happen. And it's a radical but like obvious reversal of why don't we just flip that into, how do I want to feel? What things do I do that make me feel that way? And how do you lean into that, as opposed to, I bet I'll feel different if I, I don't know, win the lottery, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's simple, but it's actually really profound.
Aren't all greatest truths really simple? Like that's my favorite text is the Tao Te Ching, and it's all just beautiful, simple phrases, and it just hits you, and you're like, oh yeah, the middle way. That's pretty obvious. So yeah, I really agree with that, and I'm really glad you brought up about the athletes, because we as a society worship athletes. Like, we're obsessed, and we don't realize that these athletes, and we used to do it in the military as well, like the way we learnt flying planes was visualizing. Like, we literally had a broomstick between our legs and we were going through the motion, and then we just got on a plane and we could fly it. Like, it's amazing what the imagination can do. And every creation, every business came from someone imagining something. They thought something that we now deem to be normal, back then it was crazy and wacky. So when people go logical science brains, I'm like, realize that the thing that you are working on was wild one day. Like, it was completely wacky. So we can learn from athletes. We can learn, like, they know the visualization. Why aren't then we applying it in all areas of our life? Why does it work? Like, when a formula is universal, when it's a universal truth, it doesn't work in one area, it works universally. Like, that truth in one area is a truth in another. There's no such thing as truthy or not truthy. Like, it's universal. So it means we can change anything. It's completely malleable. And I just came back from a really awesome experience. One of my good friends, Colin O'Brady, 10-time world record holder, him and another guy is going to break the world record attempt of the fastest crossing of America in bike riding. And
oh wow,
they're going for like 6 days and under. It's a fast crossing, and they knew that they probably had the fitness to do it, but they realized that it was more than just them. The race isn't about them crossing. It's about getting these two bikes. It's a dot. It's a GPS marker. How do we get these bikes across the country as fast as possible? And who are all the different people involved? There's a crew of 15 people who are on the race course in vans the whole time. And they just went, we realize we have to become one, and it's going to be our mindset which makes a difference. So they brought me in as a mindset coach, and we did this intense 3-day training camp. And we were all about helping them realize that they were going to get in their own ways. Like, what are the limiting beliefs that would stop them? How do we visualize the end? And we went through this whole process, bringing up different belief loops, understanding how to respond rather than react in stressful environments, how to understand that, visualize all the different things that could go wrong. So then we actually, when it happens, we just automatically know how to make it right. And then we put them in a 24-hour race simulation where we were doing it, and we're putting little tests. And then I guided them through the breath journey, and then did this manifestation process. And at the end, they now have no doubt that they're world record holders. They're not wondering, are we going to be world record holders? They know it. And now they get to play. Like I just said, like, just enjoy the next few weeks. Like, enjoy this period and have the whole experience, and knowing that you're a world record holder. And I have no doubt they will. Like, it's absolutely incredible, because they've gone into a place, they've bypassed, like, they haven't bypassed, the physical is still there, but they've transcended, and they've gone into a higher realm, which is a lot more powerful.
Amazing. Well, Finnian, we could spend 6 more hours talking, which I think, so we'd have some podcast listeners who'd want to go that long, but I think for most people's sake, I want to start landing this plane. But I have one more question for you, which is, tell me your, how are you going to bring everything that you've learned, your fear, choosing love over fear, and your intentionality framework into being a dad?
Beautiful question. So I'll start by opening up my book because this will sort of give you an indication of how I'm seeing it. It starts off with, to my next spiritual teacher, Bear Kelly. I made a promise to myself as a little boy that I would show you the love that I wished I could have felt. This book was my personal journey to get to a place where I was ready to honor this promise. I love being on this trip with you. Thank you for making my miracle. So the way I see it is that I'm just here as a guide, but really he's my spiritual teacher, and I've got so much to learn from him. So rather than feeling that I need to tell him everything, like when they start asking like, what's that? I'm going to go, tell me, what do you see? Because I see a tree, you might see a living organism that's talking to you. So that's definitely one way I'm going to do it. I'm also going to realize the fragility of a human being and that I'm going to make mistakes. But the big thing is I'm going to forgive myself and I'm going to acknowledge them straight away, because that is what I've craved my whole life, is acknowledgement. And I believe it's what all of us want. We can handle really horrible things happening to us as long as we're acknowledged and people see us for who we are. So I'm going to acknowledge, oh, yeah, I've done it again. I've slipped. My own program's kicked up. And I'm going to love that child so much. And I'm going to go on journeys. We're going to bring intentionality to our life. I'm going to be curious about what he wants to feel and have sort of initiations of life journeys. And I'm really going to hold myself accountable and be realizing that I am coding him every single day. So every way I communicate, behave is coding him, and be conscious. So it's going to hold me to a greater level of accountability. And at the same time, I'm also going to teach him how to recode himself so he can unravel the things that I've perhaps put some faulty coding into him as well. But most importantly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to love his mother so deeply, because the more I feed her, the more we show a conscious relationship, the more he feels safe. And ultimately, that's what we need to really expand and grow.
Love all of that. I'm already seeing the follow-up book is, the other side of fatherhood and lessons learned from Bear. So that's looking forward to it already. And I haven't even gotten my first copy. I want to go on record. I didn't know that was the dedication when I asked you that question, but man, I'm glad I asked. Finny, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for spending time with me and with us. We'll have a link to the book if you want to go ahead and pre-order, although 3 weeks out, I think we'll release this before it's June 18th. So we'll have people please go ahead and pre-order, and FinnianKelly.com if people want to learn more about you as a whole. Yeah, and Intentionality.com. There's a great app there that you can get all the breath practices and everything. So both of them will work perfectly. Amazing. Well, thank you, brother. And great to see you. Amazing.
That's all for this episode. Thanks everyone for listening. And if you're looking for more, be sure to follow us on social at WildHealthMD and head over to wildhealth.com or wildhealth.com/premium to become a patient and experience precision medicine for yourself.